cold wind howled across the empty land, throwing snow against the sides of a small, lonely cabin. No one had visited this place in years. The man who lived there, his name was Cain, preferred it that way. He liked the silence, the stillness, the quiet that came after pain. 5 years ago, Cain left the rest of the galaxy behind. He left war, loss, and heartbreak. He built this cabin with his own hands, near the edge of a dead forest on a frozen planet no one cared about. He hunted his food, chopped his own wood, and spoke to no one. That's how he wanted it, until the knock. It came in the middle of the night, not loud, just soft, barely there, like someone too scared to ask for help. Cain sat up in bed. He froze. The wind outside was strong, but that sound wasn't wind. Knock, knock. His pulse quickened. He grabbed his old rifle from the corner, the one he hadn't touched in years. The floor creaked as he walked toward the door. He held his breath, then opened it fast. 2 figures stood outside. One was tall, thin, and shaking. Her arms were wrapped tightly around a small bundle pressed against her chest. Her skin was a soft shade of violet, almost glowing under the snow. Her face was gaunt, eyes wide with fear. The small bundle in her arms shifted. It was a child. A little girl with blue-gray skin and white hair, no older than 6. Cain said nothing. He stared at them. The woman tried to speak, but her lips were cracked and dry. She raised one hand, begging. Her voice cracked as she spoke in broken English. Double quotes, please, ... help. Just one night. The girl coughed softly, her body limp in her mother's arms. Her tiny feet were bare, swollen and purple from cold. Cain saw the mother's arms covered in frost. They had been walking in the snow too long. He turned them away. They would die before sunrise. He stepped back and opened the door wider. The alien woman's eyes filled with tears. And she stepped inside, clutching the child tightly. Cain shut the door behind them. The wind screamed for a moment, then silence returned. He pointed to the fireplace. Sit there, he said. She knelt by the fire, holding her daughter close. Cain grabbed more wood and fed the flames. Filled the room. The girl whimpered. Her hands were shaking. Cain wrapped her in a thick blanket and handed another to the mother. What's your name? He asked. The woman blinked, trying to understand. Varel, she said slowly. Daughter, ... Lura. Cain nodded. He didn't ask more. Instead, he went to the corner and opened a metal box. Inside, he had dried meat, soup pouches, and a few leftover berries from last fall. He heated one packet of soup and gave it to her. Varel took it with both hands, whispering thanks in her language as she fed. Lura first, who slowly sipped the warm broth. Then she took a few careful sips herself. Her body was still trembling. Cain sat down across from them, watching. He didn't know what to say, didn't even know if he should say anything. But something inside him stirred something he hadn't felt in years. Varel's eyes met his for a moment. There was sadness in them, fear, and something else, shame. Why are you out here? Cain finally asked. Varel looked down. Her fingers tightened around the cup. No home, she said. No people. They sent us away after. ... He died. Your mate, Cain guessed. She nodded. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They blamed me. Cain said nothing. He had seen that kind of cruelty before. He had fought in a war where entire villages were punished because of one mistake. He had watched people suffer while the powerful stayed warm and fed. Now this woman and her daughter were here, asking only for warmth. Nothing more. He stood and grabbed another blanket. Varel looked startled as he draped it gently over her shoulders. You're safe here, Cain said. Varel's eyes widened, then softened. She nodded slowly. The fire crackled, filling the room with soft light. Lura curled up near the hearth, finally asleep. Her small hand gripped a torn cloth doll, its eyes made of buttons. Cain stared at her for a long moment. He had lived alone for years. No visitors, no voices, no touch. But tonight, his cabin wasn't quiet. There was breath in the air, the soft sound of a child sleeping, and the trembling sigh of a mother who thought death was certain until a human opened his door. Something had changed, and Cain didn't know why. But he no longer wished to be alone. Not tonight. The wind outside roared like a wild beast, but inside Cain's small cabin, fire cracked and glowed, fighting back the cold. The room smelled of hot soup and old wood. Pharrell sat close to the flames, her alien skin still dusted with ice. Her daughter, Laura, lay curled in a blanket, sleeping soundly for the first time in what must have been days. Cain didn't sleep. He sat in the shadows. Near the table, watching the fire, watching them, he kept his rifle across his lap, not out of fear, but habit. His eyes stayed fixed on the woman and her child. They looked peaceful now, but he remembered the way Varel had begged at his door. Her voice shaking, her arms frozen to the bone. She had nothing. No food, no shoes for her child, no supplies. And now she had his fire. The flames flickered over her face. Cain noticed how thin she looked, how her hands were scarred from old burns, how her clothing was torn and stitched by hand. Just come from a long walk, she had survived something terrible. Cain stood quietly and stepped into his back storage room. It wasn't much, but he still had half a loaf of nut bread, some dried roots, and a small pouch of tea. He returned, set them on the table, and began boiling water. The sound woke Varel. She blinked slowly, then sat up straighter, her body stiff, looked at the food in Cain's hands, then at the rifle beside him. Her eyes narrowed, confused. This. For us? She asked softly. Cain gave a nod. I'm not going to let a kid starve in my house, he said. Varel lowered her eyes. Thank you, human. Cain, he corrected. My name is Cain. She repeated it carefully, Cain-like. It was a word from another world, heavy and strange on her tongue. He handed her the warm tea. She wrapped her fingers around the metal cup, sipping slowly. Then she looked toward her daughter, still sleeping soundly, her tiny form barely moving under the blanket. She hasn't eaten properly in days, Varel said quietly. She wouldn't. Stop crying. ... Then she stopped crying at all. Cain frowned. He'd seen that before, starving children who didn't cry, just stared, silent and broken. He slid the bread and dried roots toward her. Eat, you'll need your strength. Varel hesitated, then gently woke her daughter. Laura stirred, blinking up at the fire, confused at first, but then she saw her mother's face and the food in her hand. Slowly, like someone waking from a long nightmare, she took the bread and bit into it. A small sound escaped her lips, not words, not a cry, just relief. Cain watched as Varel fed her, bit by bit, never taking more than a few bites for herself. The mother was starving, but she gave it all to her child. You've been walking a long time? Cain said. Varel nodded. From the mining camp, she said. Far east? We walked for 5 days, hid during the day, moved at night. Why? Said I was cursed, she whispered. My mate died during a cave-in. They blamed me for his bad luck. His brothers ... tried to sell me, said my daughter was too weak to be worth keeping. Cain's jaw tightened, and no one helped. They looked away, Varel said. Everyone always looks away. Not everyone, Cain thought. Not anymore. He got up and pulled another blanket from a high shelf. Without a word, he handed it to her. Varel looked at it, surprised. I can work, she said quickly. I can clean, cook, gather wood. I don't want to be a burden. Cain raised an eyebrow. You walk through a blizzard with your kid, starving and hunted, and now you're worried about cleaning my cabin? I just ... I want to stay, she said. For her, it's just a little while. Cain walked to the fire and sat across from her. You stay as long as you need, he said. But I need to know if someone's following you. Varel hesitated. Maybe, she said. There were 2 guards. One of them had a tracker, I think. But the snow may have covered our trail. Cain leaned forward. If they find you, they'll find me. I don't plan on dying for nothing. She met his eyes. I don't want to bring danger to your home. I'll leave tomorrow if you're not going anywhere, he cut in. Not until your daughter can walk without falling over. Varel's mouth opened in shock. Then slowly, it turned into something rare, something that hadn't touched her lips in weeks. A small, quiet smile. The kind of smile people give when they stop running. Cain said nothing more. He simply threw another log on the fire, watched the sparks fly up the chimney, and sat back in his chair. The storm outside could scream all it wanted. Inside, the first time in years, the fire was shared and Cain didn't feel alone anymore. Cain was used to silence, but not this kind. For years his cabin had been quiet, filled only with the sounds of the wind, the fire, and the rhythm of his own breath. But now, there was another silence inside one that made the walls feel tighter. Heavier. The little alien girl hadn't said a single word. She ate when fed, nodded when asked simple things, and followed her mother's gentle touches, but she never spoke. Not a whisper, not a hum, not even a cry in her sleep. Cain noticed it more each day. 3 days had passed since he'd found them in the snow. Virel had grown stronger. She swept the cabin, cooked what little food they had, and tried to be useful. Her eyes stayed low when Cain spoke, but her voice grew steadier. She still feared something outside, maybe someone, but at least her body wasn't trembling anymore. Lura, though, stayed locked in her shell. She sat by the fire for hours, hugging her little cloth doll, staring into the flames with big glassy eyes. Her tiny hands never let go of the toy, its worn-out face patched with thread. Cain tried speaking to her. "What's your doll's name?" No answer. "You like the fire?" Still nothing. He even carved her a small wooden bird, sanded smooth, with tiny wings. He placed it beside her gently, but she didn't even look at it. She just curled tighter into the blanket and pressed her forehead to her knees. That night, Cain couldn't sleep. He sat near the fire, sharpening a dull blade, while Virel dozed on the floor, wrapped in layers. Lura was beside her, eyes closed, breathing slow, but then she moved. Lura twisted in her sleep, a soft whimper slipping from her lips. Cain paused, eyes locked on the girl, and then she whispered, a single word, barely a breath. Cain, ... Blade dropped from his hand, hitting the wooden floor with a dull clink. He froze. Did she really say it? Or was he just tired? Virel stirred, waking quickly. "What's wrong?" Cain stared at the child. "She said my name," he murmured. "Her sleep." Virel blinked, turning toward her daughter, eyes wide. "She did. I heard it," Cain said. "I know I did." Virel reached out and brushed her daughter's hair softly. "She hasn't spoken since we left the mines," she said. "She saw things, ... heard things. Things a child shouldn't. When her father died, she stopped speaking, and they tried to take me away. She stopped smiling." Cain swallowed. "She's not broken," he said. "No," Virel agreed. "But she's scared." Cain nodded, standing and tossing more wood into the fire. The flames grew, casting shadows across the walls. "She said my name," he repeated. That meant something. She trusted him at least a little, and by the silence wouldn't last forever. The next day, Cain worked outside, cutting frozen branches. For firewood, the wind had died down, but snow still covered the land in heavy blankets. The sky was gray, hiding the sun, and his breath came out in white clouds. When he returned, he found Virel teaching Lura how to shape flour cakes using the last of the root powder. The girl wasn't smiling, but her hands were moving, slowly. Carefully, he watched them in silence. Virel looked up. "She helped me today, I see that." She didn't speak, but she looked at me, really looked, but that hasn't happened in a long time. Cain placed a new pile of wood near the door. "She'll talk again," he said. "You'll see." That evening, as darkness returned, Cain sat by the fire and took out a piece of old paper. He began sketching a map of the area, marking nearby caves, old water lines, and spots where the snow thinned first. He was thinking ahead, planning, preparing. Then a small shadow moved beside him. He looked down. It was Lura. She was holding the wooden bird he had carved. She didn't say anything, just placed it beside the paper and sat down next to him. Eyes studied the map, her tiny hand brushing the corner. Cain didn't speak. He slid the paper closer to her, then passed her the pencil. Lura hesitated. Then she slowly began to draw a tree. A simple tree, just a line with branches, but it was something. Virel watched from the fire. tears silently falling down her cheeks. Cain smiled just a little. The girl who wouldn't speak had found a way to say something without words. And for him, that was enough. The wind was no longer just cold, it screamed. A new blizzard rolled in from the mountains, thicker and heavier than before. Snow fell like it had a purpose, burying everything in sight. Trees vanished under white mounds, and Cain's cabin stood like a lonely island. Surrounded by nothing but storm, inside the fire burned low, silence filled the space again. Cain placed his hand against the window frost, bit his skin instantly. He pulled it back and sighed. They were trapped. Wood is enough for 3 more days, he said quietly. Varel nodded, her arms wrapped tight around herself. Food? Not much, Cain replied. 1 dried loaf, half a pouch of roots, a few berries, and that's it. They both looked at the girl curled under blankets, sleeping with the wooden bird in her arms. Lyra hadn't spoken again since whispering his name, but she stayed near Cain now. Followed him with her eyes, even reached for his hand once when thunder cracked above. Varel stood up slowly. We'll leave in the morning, she said. No, Cain said firmly. You won't survive 10 minutes out there. I can't take from you, she said. You didn't ask for this. I didn't, Cain said, but you're here. She's just a child. I'm not letting her die so I can be a little more comfortable. Varel turned away, her shoulders shaking. Not from cold, but from something deeper. She walked too. The fire and dropped another small log in, even though it was the last one from the stack beside the hearth. I used to think someone would come for us, she said. When we were cast out, I thought someone would care. No one ever came? Cain asked. No, she said. Only cold. Only silence. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he got up and walked to the storage hatch under the floorboards. He lifted the wooden panel and reached inside. When he came back, he held a soft blanket, clean, untouched, wrapped in cloth. He handed it to her. Varel stared at it like it was treasure. This is yours. Now it's yours, Cain said. Clutched it, lowering her eyes. Why are you being kind to us? Cain shrugged. 'Cause I've seen what happens when no one is. Later that night, the storm raged louder. The roof groaned under the weight of snow. Cain stood guard at the door, watching the shadows flicker. From the firelight, Varel sat near the fire, rocking Lyra gently. She hummed something soft and strange, maybe a lullaby from her homeworld. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were focused on her daughter. She's still not eating enough, Cain said. She's trying, Varel replied. She wants to be strong. But she doesn't understand why we were cast out. She grow, Cain said. Here, she will. Varel looked at him. Why did you come to this world? You have strength? Skills? You could have stayed in the cities. I left, Cain said, after I lost everything. War, family, friends, they were all gone. So I found a place where no one could find me. And now we did. Varel whispered. Cain didn't answer. He walked to the table and poured 2 cups of warm tea from the boiled pot. He gave one to her. She held it in both hands, staring into the steam. She drew today, Varel said. With you, I haven't seen her draw since before the mines. She's got a steady hand, Cain replied. Could be a builder. Varel smiled faintly. Maybe if we live that long. We will, Cain said. We just need to make it through this storm. Thunder rumbled again, shaking the windows. Varel reached across the table and touched Cain's hand. I don't expect anything. I know what we are. But thank you for warmth, for fire, for not being afraid of us. Cain met her eyes. You're not monsters. No, she said softly. But sometimes even monsters live better than widows. And their daughters. Cain tightened his grip on her fingers. Not here, not anymore. And as the wind screamed louder than before, as snow buried the last trail to the outside world, 3 souls sat together in the glow of a fading fire. The storm outside was wild, but the one inside, filled with doubt, fear, and old pain, was beginning to quiet. Cain spotted the tracks at dawn. The storm had finally broken, and soft gray light poured through the cabin windows. Snow still covered the land, but it was no longer falling. Kane stepped outside with his axe and saw them deep boot marks in. The snow, fresh. Leading around the back of the cabin, he hadn't made them. And Virel had never stepped beyond the door. Kane's breath turned sharp in his throat. He followed the prints carefully, each one pressing deep into the frost like a warning. Whoever had walked here was big, heavy, and armed. He could see the mark of a holster. Dragging across the surface, he stopped near a tree where one boot print disappeared suddenly into a dented patch of snow. Someone had crouched there, watching. His eyes scanned the trees. Nothing moved. No birds. No wind. No sign of the intruder. Kane's jaw tightened. He returned to the cabin without a word and quietly locked the door behind him. Virel was boiling. Water, her back turned, while Lura sat near the fire, humming faintly to herself. He grabbed his rifle from beside the wall. Virel looked up, confused. "What is it?" "We're not alone," Kane said. "Someone's been out there, watching us." Her hands froze in mid-motion. "They followed us, or they found us by accident," Kane replied. "But I don't believe in accidents anymore," Virel stepped closer to her daughter and gently wrapped her in a blanket. "Is the door strong enough?" she asked. "It'll hold," Kane said. "But I want you both downstairs." He opened a panel in the floor, revealing a hidden space beneath the cabin, a small emergency shelter he had built long ago. "Just in case." Virel hesitated. But when Kane looked her in the eyes, she nodded and carried Lura down into the darkness. Kane sealed the hatch, dragged a heavy table over it, and sat near the fire with his rifle across his knees. Hours passed. Nothing came. The wind returned, soft this time, brushing against the cabin like whispers. Then just before nightfall, he heard it, scraped metal against wood. It came from the back of the cabin. Kane stood slowly, silent as a shadow, crept toward the back window and peeked out, there between two trees stood a tall figure in dark armor, one arm raised, holding something metallic. A scanner. It blinked with red light, aimed directly at the cabin. Kane ducked back. They weren't just searching, they were tracking, and they knew someone was here. He moved quickly, grabbing a flare gun and a sharp hunting blade. He didn't plan to die. Tonight, not without a fight. Suddenly, the window shattered. Glass exploded inward, and cold air rushed into the room. Kane rolled behind the table just as a beam of energy sizzled through the wall, blackening the wood. He aimed and fired the flare gun through the broken window. It wasn't a weapon, but it blinded the attacker for a second. Enough time to move, Kane kicked open the door and charged outside, circling fast. He caught the shadow by surprise, slamming into the armored figure with full force. The two crashed into the snow, grappling. The stranger was strong, but Kane was desperate. He slammed the butt of his rifle into the figure's helmet once, twice until the red visor cracked. The intruder groaned and rolled away. Kane pointed his weapon at the downed attacker, breathing hard. "Who sent you?" The figure didn't answer. He stepped closer, ripped off the helmet tand, froze. The face under the mask wasn't human. It was a male of Virel's species. Older, with silver markings on his forehead and a cruel scar across his jaw. His eyes burned with hate. "She's ours," he spat. "She belongs to the bloodline." Kane didn't blink. "She doesn't belong to anyone." "She ran," the man growled. "A widow must serve her husband's house, even in death. She defied the law. And that child, she's useless." Kane's fingers tightened around the rifle. "You say one more word about that child, I'll bury you here." The alien's eyes narrowed. "You're alone, human. They'll come for you too." Kane stepped back, raised the weapon higher. "Let them try." And he struck the man's head once more, hard enough to knock him out cold. Minutes later, Kane dragged the unconscious body deep into the woods, far from the cabin. He left him tied against a tree, stripped of his gear, with a message burned into the snow beside him: "She is under my protection." When he returned, the cabin was quiet again. He moved the table and opened the hatch. Virel stared up at him. trembling. Was it them? One of them, Cain said, but not the last. She climbed out slowly, holding Lyra tight. What do we do now? We prepare, Cain said. This is our home now. I won't let anyone take it away. And for the first time, Varel didn't look afraid. The night didn't wait. It came fast, dark, and heavy, sinking its weight into the frozen land. But this time Cain wasn't watching the snow. He was watching the tree line. He had set traps. He had sharpened every blade in the cabin. He had reinforced the door with a second metal bar pulled from an old heater. But deep inside, he knew it might not be enough. Varel sat beside the fire, holding Lyra close. The little girl was wide awake now, eyes darting to every shadow, gripping her doll tight against her chest. Will they come back? Varel asked softly. Cain didn't turn from the window. Yes. How many? No idea, he said. But they know she's here, and they know I'm not giving her up. Varel stood slowly. Then I'll fight too. Cain looked at her for the first time. Her thin arms, her tired eyes, her body still bruised from the journey. She didn't look like a fighter, but her voice was steady. He nodded once. You'll stay with Lyra. Guard the back room. If they break through the front, I'll stop them. If I fall, take her and run. I won't leave you, she whispered. A loud crack stopped them both. The front window exploded. Shards of glass flew into the room like knives. Cain grabbed Varel and pulled her behind the table. A flash of blue light lit the night outside then. The front door shook under something heavy slamming into it. They were here. Varel ran to the back with Lyra, slamming the inner hatch shut. Cain stood in the center of the cabin, rifle aimed. Breath tight in his chest, the door broke open. 2 armored figures stepped in. Weapons raised cold eyes behind metal visors. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They were here to take. The girl and to kill anyone who stood in their way. Cain fired first. The blast hit the lead attacker in the shoulder, knocking him into the wall. The second ducked low and returned fire. Cain dropped behind the fireplace. Bullets burning into the wood above his head. Smoke filled the air. The fire roared higher. Cain rolled left and fired. Again his shot hit the second soldier in the leg, bringing him down with a roar. But there were more outside. He could hear them. Footsteps crunching snow, voices barking orders in a language he couldn't understand. He rushed to the door and slammed it shut, jamming a beam across the frame. Then he turned back and saw the first soldier. Rising again, Cain didn't wait. He charged. The two slammed into each other near the fire, crashing into the table, rolling across the floor. The rifle slipped from Cain's grip, and the attacker pulled a knife. They struggled. Cain blocked the blade with his arm. He felt the sting as it sliced across his forearm, warm blood spilling down to his wrist. But he didn't stop. He grabbed a burning log from the fire and drove it into the attacker's face. The scream was awful. Metal melted against skin, and the soldier dropped. Unmoving, Cain fell to one knee, gasping. The second soldier was crawling for his gun. Cain kicked it away and pinned him down with a chair leg. Tell your people, Cain growled. She's not yours anymore. The soldier spat blood. She belongs to the house. She's marked. Cain grabbed him by the collar. Not anymore. Then he knocked him out cold. Outside. Silence. No more movement. Cain grabbed his rifle again and checked the doorway. One final attacker lay in the snow, face down, his chest plate cracked open by a misfired energy cell, dead before he could even reach the steps. Cain slammed the door shut and locked it tight. The cabin smelled like smoke and blood. Wood was broken. Chairs crushed, a window gone, but the fire still burned. He was still standing. He opened the back hatch. Varel rushed out, holding Lyra close. Is it over? She asked. For now, Cain said, wiping blood from his arm. She stared at the wound. You're hurt. I've been worse. He said. Lyra walked to him slowly, still silent, but her little hand reached up and touched his arm right where the blood had soaked his sleeve, and then she spoke. Don't let them take us, she said softly. Cain knelt down and held her hand. I won't, he said. Not ever. Virel dropped beside them, her eyes full of something stronger than fear, something like hope. Cain looked at both of them, breathing hard. They had come to his door as strangers begging for warmth. Now, they were more than guests. They were his reason to fight. Snow covered the blood. By morning, the cabin looked calm. Again, to calm. Again to calm. Wind brushed softly across the roof, and fresh flakes buried every footprint from the night before. But inside, the air still carried the smell of fire, of fear, and of something else. Change. Cain stepped outside, his wounded arm wrapped tight. He looked across the white hills, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. No more soldiers. No more shadows. Just cold sky and silence. When he returned inside, Virel was already awake. She was sweeping broken glass into a pile with a cracked broom. Lura sat near the fire, drawing shapes into the ash with her finger. Cain looked at them. Quietly, they didn't ask to stay. They didn't have to. They already belonged here now. I buried the bodies in the east woods, Cain said. Marked the ground, just in case their kind comes looking. Virel paused, then nodded. You didn't have to do that. I know, Cain replied, but I didn't want her to see them. He looked at Lura. She was humming softly, but without fear. The wooden bird sat in her lap, wings smudged with ash. She spoke again last night, Virel whispered. After you fell asleep. She asked if she could call you something new. Cain raised a brow. What? She said. Father. The word hit him like a punch, quiet. Unexpected. But deep. He didn't answer right away. He walked to the fire, knelt beside Lura, and held out his hand. She looked up, blinking then, placed her small hand in his. Is that okay? She asked. Cain nodded slowly. It's more than okay, he said. It's an honor. Lura smiled, the kind of smile that makes a man forget every war, every wound, every lonely night spent talking to walls. Cain sat down beside her and felt warmth return, not just from the fire, but from something far stronger. Family. Later that day, Cain began rebuilding the broken wall. He cut new wood, sealed the holes, and crafted a better lock for the door. Virel helped, steady and skilled. She didn't ask what would happen next. She simply worked beside him, like someone who had already made her choice. At sunset, they shared the last of the berries by the fire. Lura had made a crown out of dry sticks and placed it on Cain's head with a giggle. You're king now, she said. Cain laughed for the first time in years. Virel leaned against his shoulder. You saved us. You saved me first, he replied. That night, Virel came to his side, not as a stranger, but as something more. She curled beside him, her hand over his heart, her breath soft and steady. Lura slept peacefully. In the next room, wrapped in blankets and dreams, and Cain, who had once chosen silence, once chosen to live far away from the world, no longer wished to be alone. In the days that followed, they worked together. Cain showed Virel how to hunt small game through the snow. She taught him how to preserve meat with alien herbs she still carried in a pouch around her waist. Lura learned to speak more, each day her voice stronger, clearer, full of questions and laughter. One evening, while Cain carved new boots for the girl, Virel sat beside him and asked, What happens if more of them come? Cain didn't look up. Then they'll find this isn't just a cabin anymore. It's a home, and they'll leave us alone. No, he said. But they'll learn the same thing. The last ones did I. Don't give up family. Virel placed a hand on his cheek. Neither do I. As spring crept over the snow-covered hills, small green buds began to push through the ice. Birds returned, calling from distant branches. Life, slow and stubborn, came back to the frozen world. And so did Cain, not just the soldier, not just the man in hiding, but the father, the protector, the one who opened the door on a stormy night and found something far greater than peace. He found purpose. He found love. He found a reason to never be alone again.